So thank you everyone joining us here. We've got special guest Amber Romaniuk of Amber Approved, who helps you gain body freedom for life. Yes, thanks.
Hello.
Cool. Now, I had some requests from some customers that obviously so many of us are going through stressful times. And when this question was asked, I immediately thought of you because I know this is your warehouse, this is your bag. When it comes to stressful times, when it comes to emotional eating, when it comes to sugar cravings, you have had such a journey with this yourself, and you've helped so many women along the path. You've got a podcast, you've done magazines, you've done cookbooks, you've got blogs, you've got so many resources out there. And I said, yes, Amber is the perfect person to help us with this, to help us get clear in this times of stress. So maybe let's just jump right into it. When it comes to stress and whether that is family, career, pandemic, society, there's any number of stressors. I know a lot of us, we can tend to kind of, see food as that outlet to kind of help us. And of course, food is healing. It is sacred. It is extremely beneficial, but sometimes we can kind of cross over into that more emotional eating, binge eating.
Yeah.
What would you have to share with someone that may be struggling with that?
Yeah. And so I think the first thing is honestly try and have some compassion for yourself if you are struggling, because there can be shame and embarrassment and all sorts of other, negative emotions that can come along, self-judgment with, whether you're minimally emotionally eating or you're full-blown binge eating. And it's to really have compassion because there's so many layers to any level of emotional eating. And I always like to, say emotional eating is any reason for eating other than physical nourishment. So if you're stress eating, if you're eating and watching TV, you just finished dinner, but you're still like, oh, I want to keep eating. There's, certain foods in the cupboard maybe that trigger you that you can't get out of your mind. So it's just to kind of understand what emotional eating is. And so I think the first step after, trying to give yourself some compassion is to understand and identify what particular stressors in this case are going on for me. And maybe you want to pull out a piece of paper and just write your stressors down and then rate them. What's like the top stressor? What's number 2? What's number 3, number 4? And pertaining to those stressors, are they things that are in your, control that you have ability to do something about, or are they completely out of your control? And to really start exploring those things that are within your control. So like the first example is maybe your schedule is really stressful. Maybe it's really overbooked, or maybe you're, making up for, the past few months when you had to be indoors more and you're trying to go out and get a million things done and do things for other people. And you're noticing you have no white space in your calendar, which is a big one that I see for a lot of people. And what that does is it creates a lack of time for ourselves, creates overwhelm. Maybe then you gain weight, or you're fatigued, or your digestion isn't working as well. And again, what's at the core is the stress, but unless we're willing to look at what is the contributor of the stress and start changing it, often the physical symptoms will just keep being fueled. The cravings get worse. The blood sugar goes out of whack. So if your schedule is overbooked, or you're just one of those kinds of people that's a perfectionist or an overachiever or a people pleaser, you've really got to take a step back and go, why am I giving so much to everything and everyone else and not to myself? And that usually the core of that is a lack of self-worth or an insecurity. And I've got to prove that I'm good enough. So I'm going to go and give to everyone else and not give to myself. And that's where we want to start to address stress with bringing in some balance with some self-care, some downtime for yourself, things like setting technology boundaries, have a dedicated, time that after this time I'm off technology, or this, this 30 minutes or hour, it's like phone free, TV free, screen free. And I am going to dedicate this time to whether it's meditation, journaling, getting out into nature, deep breathing, reading a book, taking a bath, doing mindful movement, whatever it is that you want to do to help you disconnect with the external and connect internally with yourself. But that's where the food comes in, as we start to use it as a coping tool to numb, distract, avoid, or procrastinate dealing with our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I find there's this huge kind of, well, we live in a very ego-based society where it's like, it's not safe to feel, you shouldn't feel, you're weak if you feel or express your feelings, it's bad, you should just be tough, be strong, and keep powering through. And that hustle masculine energy is not healthy for either male or female to that extent where you're going without the breaks and the stopping, because the next thing that happens is you have constant high stress regardless of where it comes from. And then you see your cortisol levels, your, stress hormone levels start to go up. And that's when we really see significant, impacts on blood sugar and cravings and potential fatigue, abdominal weight gain, especially for women, brain fog, poor memory, low sex drive, like so many potential symptoms start to happen. And then, of course, what happens? People then get really frustrated with their bodies, right? Oh, why isn't my body working the way I want my body to? Oh, what a pain in the butt. Now I'm tired. Oh, I'm bloated. And instead of us seeing the symptoms as our body's way of communicating with us, we get angry, we get frustrated, we get very reactionary. And again, because we're not taught how to listen to our bodies, we often tend to punish. So whether you go and eat something, or you go and drink, or you just go and turn off the TV and you're, numb yourself with whatever you're watching. And so the cascade keeps going, but I just kind of wanted to explain some of these kind of root pieces that can impact and start to have, this role on your physical symptoms, your mental, emotional health, not to mention, intuitively, energetically, from a frequency standpoint. The more we're eating processed foods, have our schedules overbooked, tuning out instead of tuning in, our frequency lowers. And as that happens, you may feel more negative just naturally. You may just feel like you have more negative self-talk towards yourself and your body, or, oh, I haven't been able to get everything done on my to-do list today. Shame on me. I should have tried harder. And that cascade of, self-talk and ego is what I really call it, just keeps building up. And that ego is that self-sabotaging mindset that really resides in the left brain, which is, should have done better, could have done better, try harder, be better, and that whole over deliverance of the external instead of going inside and finding that balance.
Yeah, totally. And like you said, when kind of people reach that point and they kind of that masculine drive takes over, sometimes one reaction is like, all right, I'm done. I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to
Yeah.
not eat X, Y, and Z. And you kind of you know, what I've observed in my own experience, like your willpower can take you for only so long, but you really
Mm-hmm.
haven't addressed those root causes, which then can cause you to kind of, fall and go back 5 steps, even though you might have, willed yourself like really hard, 7 steps forward kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that diet mentality is so vicious because, you see this $7 trillion plus a year diet industry that says, okay, it's really easy. All you have to do is follow these, this diet, eat these foods, don't eat these foods. And if you follow it perfectly, you'll get X results, like all of our success stories claim, and you'll be good to go. But the problem is humanity is not in perfection. You can't be perfect on a diet. When diets are telling you to cut out whole, like, good food groups, that are of support to your body, now it can cause damage to your hormones and your digestive system and your blood sugar. And any kind of all or nothing mentality, that perfectionist mindset with food, it really can create some dangerous dynamics with your relationship with food. So like you said, you go in all in on the diet, I'm going to have all the willpower in the world. You put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect, but then what ends up happening is you have no room for, dinner, like holiday dinners or social outings, or if, you decide you want to mindfully indulge in something, and because it's so rigid and it's not attainable, you may have that stressor come up, or you may be out at that dinner or whatever that is. And all of a sudden you have one little thing, and then it's like that switch flips and it's like, I've messed up, shame on myself, I shouldn't have had that. And then that triggers the emotional eating or the binge eating, that all or nothing mentality. And then you may go all the way out and eat everything that day that you weren't allowing yourself to do, or that week, and then just feel so guilty and so bloated and, beating yourself up so much. So that diet industry, largely, I feel like most of it's been designed for people to get into that vicious cycle and just essentially go from, oh my God, I gained weight, panic. I need to have some form of control, better get on the diet, fail on the diet, go back to emotional eating and not address those root issues, which is the stress, which is body image struggles, which is self-worth, and these, ego mindsets of perfection and all or nothing, and this very masculine versus having a balance in it, embracing both sides of that. And it from there really does fuel a lot of food fears. That's something I've really seen over the last couple of years since keto's come in. I know there's some people who fare well on that, and I respect that, but for the majority of the women come to me, it's really done a number on their hormones and their digestion. And now they're fearing eating an apple, they're fearing eating a carrot or a bell pepper because carbs are bad, all carbs are bad, right? On that protocol, when there's so many great nutrients that those kinds of foods can provide to us. And so whether people fear carbs or people fear keeping nuts or nut butter in the house because once they start eating them, they can't stop, or it's sugar or whatever it is, it's very important that we address the all or nothing mentality and those food fears, because having food fears and feeling as though you have to, avoid especially items that are whole food based for fear of losing control or for fear of gaining weight, we really have to address that and slowly work on people gaining their food courage, because it's just a very unhealthy dynamic to be in. If you think of an apple and you get a stress response, and even the thought of eating it gives you a stomach ache, right? It's so
Yeah.
powerful, the power of the mind.
Yeah, for sure. So, the approach you're suggesting is obviously hugely kind of like psychological, and you mentioned some
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle kind of approaches addressing that root cause of stress. And we did start to venture into kind of sugar seems to be a big trip, a big trigger for people, either from the food fear, right? You get into this,
Mm-hmm.
keto mentality, everything's going to be low carb, low sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and likely we've all been through that mentality of, well, it was fat initially, but okay, now it's sugar we got to avoid.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, myself included, over the years have dealt with a lot of like sugar cravings.
Mm.
How do you go about navigating that? Because it seems to have such a huge kind of physiological as well as psychological pull.
Yeah.
Sugar, whether
It's
they're natural or refined or anything, right?
it's significant, and I'm glad you brought this up because this used to be my biggest battle, was refined, well, any sugar really, but I was so addicted to refined sugar. Like when they say you get a high or that, serotonin dopamine hit, like I swear I felt like a drug addict, but with sugar, because it was to the point where my cravings were so intensive that if I was out at a social setting, or out somewhere, I would like make up an excuse or lie to leave so I could get to the store, buy all my sugar items and go home and binge on them. Like that's how intensive my addiction was. Now, everyone has a different spectrum. But wherever you are on the spectrum with sugar cravings, are you having them daily? Is there a certain time of day where they start to come up for you? I know a lot of my clients notice a sugar craving come up in the afternoon with a lull, and that's adrenal related, that's cortisol imbalance related. So that could be one aspect of the cravings that, make them stronger. The more out of whack cortisol levels are, I find the more out of whack blood sugar is, because they're very connected. So if you feel like you get lightheaded or dizzy, or you all of a sudden notice your energy drop, or you get hangry, or you're all of a sudden you go from feeling quite satisfied to, just so hungry, that's just such a sign that your cortisol could be dictating, your blood sugar. So there's that aspect of it. There is the emotional eating aspect of it where, the more you eat of something, especially sugars, whether it's, I find refined hit harder than natural sugars do. But the more you eat of them, the more it throws your blood sugar off. And then there's the component of candida. So candida feeds off of especially refined sugars, but the more you eat, if you have that imbalance of unhealthy bacteria, whether you've had to take antibiotics or you've just eaten sugar and drank alcohol and have never really addressed that part, since it's a main food source, it will give you really intensive cravings, the bigger that overgrowth is. And not that you have to go on now a restrictive candida cleanse, because that doesn't work for a lot of people either, but it's just starting to address, okay, well, why is my blood sugar off? Am I eating a lot of refined sugar? Am I not eating regularly throughout the day? Are you skipping breakfast? Are you skipping lunch? Right? Do your meals not have a wholesome balance of healthy, good protein sources, fat sources, and good carbohydrates? I find a lot of people are still missing the fat.
Mhm.
Um, they're still in this mentality of fat's bad. And protein, I see a lot of people lack with, especially if people are more plant-based. So just making sure that you are getting adequate amounts of protein and fat with your carbohydrates, because carbs and fat break down more slowly than the sugars. And so they can help with that sugar breakdown. And I always say, a great tip is, say you're having a piece of fruit, well, always have some kind of a fat with it to break the sugars down more slowly, right? So have the nut butter with your apple, have the amazing coconut butter from the light cellar, right?
Oh,
With
yeah.
it's so good, right? And it's like dessert. So having, that combination breaks it down more slowly, and that keeps your blood sugar more stable. And snacks, a lot of people, especially if they're in a diet mentality, it's all about calories. So the less I eat, the higher likelihood of weight loss. But oftentimes they're under eating. And when people start to eat regularly through the day and have their breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and even integrate a snack, especially if it's that afternoon slump that you find that hits and you get really hungry, it can just stabilize that blood sugar, and then that goes away. And then people start to see the cravings go away as they eat regularly through the day, make sure they're having adequate amounts of fats and proteins with their carbs, and start looking at what kinds of sugars am I putting in my body. It's not about you can't ever have refined sugar again, because that's not realistic, but it is about, can I integrate more real raw honey, real pure maple syrup, coconut sugar? Do you feel like your body enjoys stevia more, or monk fruit? Like, what is it, as you start to experiment with different things, that really feels good for your body? Because I think everyone is a bit different, and everyone's body kind of thrives off of even different natural sweeteners, right? So doing some experimentation with that, I think, is so powerful. And then the other huge piece with blood sugar is sleep. It's the sleep stress piece. So I often find when people are not sleeping well, and they have high stress, that poor sleep increases your ghrelin, which makes you hungry, and decreases your leptin, which is the hunger hormone that makes you full. So it's like the hollow leg syndrome. It's like you feel like you could just eat all day and you're not satisfied. Well, that's because of the significant, throw off that poor sleep has on your hunger hormones. And so that's where, if you're like, oh, I do struggle with sleep and I am noticing it's a trigger for me, and I eat more, and, my blood sugar is off, eating regularly through the day, good hydration, self-care, getting to bed earlier that night. These seem like such simple things, but they have a significant impact on the way that they can help you regulate your blood sugar, help with cravings. A couple of my favorites, though, for really helping with the blood sugar, I love cinnamon, especially like any kind of blend,
Mhm.
now that we're in fall. Like, I love you guys have, I think is the mulling spice, or it's in a jar. I buy it every year. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, the mulling spice, and then they now have
Yes.
the pumpkin pie spice out as well.
Yeah. So, getting some kind of a tea or something you can put in your smoothie like that. I love cinnamon's got chromium, which is great for blood sugar. I also love L-glutamine powder, because it actually helps to shut off the sugar cravings as you're helping to navigate your way through dealing with cravings. That L-glutamine powder, it's the only amino acid that crosses the blood-brain barrier and helps to shut off that part of the brain that's like sugar, sugar, sugar. And it's great for the gut. So it's kind of a win-win if you're dealing with, both of those things. But that was honestly a saving grace for me when I was struggling with binge eating and sugar cravings, when I discovered the glutamine, as I was starting to, deal with my emotions pertaining to the emotional eating. It would prevent me from driving to the store and buying the food. So that's something that people can experiment with, as well. But
That's a
there's a
good.
lot of, and you can attest to this, there's some great things we can add in for blood sugar. Ashwagandha is great for the adrenals, which helps with cravings, and the blood sugar. So that's a really great one that I find
When you're
helps.
talking about L-glutamine, was that a supplement, or was it more to kind of meat stock, bone broth, that type of idea?
So I was doing the powder, but definitely now that I'm more into broths and that kind of thing, you could definitely experiment and do some of that as well.
Mhm.
I noticed I would like just, drop a scoop of it into water and drink it immediately as the craving came on, or around my vulnerable craving time. It was evening for me, and I find a lot of people get the evening cravings, or again, the afternoon, evening. So I started to do that as I was getting into my vulnerable time for being triggered, and it really did help. Of course, with doing self-care, like, if I was really stressed out, I'd come home and go into meditation or go into some form of self-care to help me deal with my emotions. But having that additional support with my nutrition, with, the glutamine and essential oils as well, very powerful for helping to calm the nervous system down. It just really helped me to be able to navigate away from feeling so pulled to go to food. And I find these things really help, the people that I work with as well. It's great to have things, whether it's something that is grounding pertaining to scent, like essential oils, or having a certain kind of tea that you can sip on, right? Or a certain kind
Mhm.
of music,
Yeah.
right? And that's for, exploring these different modalities, and what feels beneficial for you is so important, because what works for you may not work for the next person, right? So experimentation is key with all of this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just kind of recap, that was great. So kind of identifying, what might be the cause of sugar cravings, and that can be a clue, as you mentioned, identifying when are the times that you're most triggered, right? Is it middle of the afternoon? Is it
Mm-hmm.
evening? And then starting to kind of look at all these different approaches, and the diet. You did a great job kind of explaining about that nice balance of like the fats, the proteins, having that with your carbohydrates, things like cinnamon, and then the L-glutamine
Mm-hmm.
as well. Sleep, yeah, that's another huge one, and a whole topic unto itself, but
Mm-hmm.
absolutely key to our blood sugar regulation. And like you say, there's a lot of kind of subtle things we can do, even with technology, right? Because that can often
Yeah.
be a source of stress for a lot of people, especially if you're tuning into, doesn't matter whether it's the mainstream or the alternative media cycles. Like a lot of it is kind of geared around, and especially right now, this kind of big continuation is building of stress. So, cutting that off at a certain time, creating that sacred space for yourself and your evening, the family, getting off of
Mm-hmm.
technology because of the blue lights,
Yep.
to shift into that kind of evening state for a more deepful rest. And then you did also touch upon the two C's, cortisol and candida.
Yeah.
So I want to explore that a little bit more. So you mentioned, kind of for cortisol, where like middle of the afternoon, right? It's like we often will find that energy slump, and
Yeah.
sugar seems to be one of the quick, easy fixes, or so we think in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of great herbs. So you mentioned ashwagandha, which is a good one, which coincidentally happens to be very fantastic for sleep
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So probably the realm of adaptogens, right?
Big time.
Yeah.
Ginseng, depending on, I guess, where the cortisol's at. If it's too high, it can be too stimulating, but if it's a bit lower, licorice is good if the cortisol is a bit lower. I did a lot of that when my cortisol, because my cortisol was like 1600 when I was in the peak of my food addiction, so it was very high. And more rest. Often people think, especially if you're getting more into that weight loss diet mentality, I have to work out to lose weight, like that's the only way. And again, it's very rigid. But the
Mhm.
problem with that is if you're already dealing with a cortisol issue, if it's too high or too low, and you're going to the gym or you're working out at home and you're doing really intensive cardio or really intensive HIIT training, and your heart rate's very elevated, it can actually just keep raising that level up or keep draining what you no longer have. And that's where I often find it throws off blood sugar even more. It can cause more weight gain because your body goes into the state of protection. Like weight is really a protective mechanism. And I think that it's gotten such a bad rap from society, right? Oh, you're fat, you're lazy, there's something wrong with you. And that's not the case at all. And it's really starting to explore and get curious about, well, okay, have I ever gotten my cortisol checked? That's a great thing, to do, whether you go through an alternative source or your doctor's open to doing it. But exploring that and seeing where it's at, because if you are in this limiting belief of I need to exercise to lose weight, but the opposite is happening, likely the exercise that you're doing can actually not be in alignment with your current state of health, and maybe you need to make temporary changes, to help regulate that cortisol. I actually had to quit the gym because it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was gaining weight even though I wasn't emotionally eating anymore. So it was
Right.
really interesting to see that dynamic. And as soon as I quit and really focused on stress management and self-care and sleep, it just fell off, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't diet. I didn't have to do anything except take care of my mind and body. But that's a big piece. That's a big factor with cortisol, I find, for a lot of the women that I connect with, because they do have that belief of that. And often people are not picking exercise that they love. They're doing it because, again, it's more that masculine at like, go hard, go home. I got to hustle in the gym. I got to get that personal best. I got to push myself past my limits. But what we don't understand is the potential impact that could be having on the cortisol levels. That does not help it, if it's already high, it just keeps going higher, 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 because exercise is a stimulant and a stressor, just like caffeine, right? And so it's about finding that happy medium so that we're not overstimulating the body too much, because technology, as you mentioned, already does that, let alone then caffeine and exercise and overbooked schedules and all these other things that could be going on. So that's another big piece with the cortisol. And then I find, the gut flora directly impacts the cortisol. And so if you have that candida overgrowth, it's like a 24-hour stressor in the body. It's just poking at your, it's kind of like a little bully in there, just poking and taunting at you. And so it does also impact cortisol and the other hormones. I find a lot of my clients end up with estrogen dominance and candida at the same time. The candida is feeding the estrogen's feeding the candida. So it's like this cycle all in itself. But when we have these kinds of things going on, it's so important for us to just kind of start reflecting on our habits and go, have I ever had to take antibiotics? What kind of movement routine am I in? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, 1 being low, where would I rate my daily stressors?
Mm-hmm.
Are you bloated all the time? Do you feel like no matter what you eat, it feels like your stomach's always sticking out, or you get some kind of discomfort? Are you really gassy all the time? Because that's such a, prominent sign of candida overgrowth. How are your bowel movements? It's such a, huge part of all of this as well. And if you are having those afternoon energy lulls, if you're having troubles falling asleep, if it's taking a couple of hours, that's a sign of like too high of cortisol in the evening. And that's when it's supposed to be, winding down and preparing us for our sleep. So often, yeah, there's that, it should be coming down and then it spikes back up right before bed. Or if you're waking in the night, those are some prominent, signs of potential hormone imbalance that could be going on. But the candida, then going to that a bit more, is so interesting. And I went through this when I was growing up. I just got handed antibiotics like for everything when I was a kid. So I just such heavy antibiotic use. And so I craved sugar, like I swear to God, from the time I was 5 until I was 20, 22 years old, just all the time. Had no idea about what candida was until I started to, read into it. But essentially understanding, wow, a lot of my cravings are being governed by all the processed sugar I'm eating, but also this candida, and starting to understand that, okay, I want to start picking away. And so adding in, some onions and garlic, just starting even with some food, some oregano, clove is great antifungal source, coconut oil, coconut butter, just adding a couple items in a day to start calming the inflammation and gently killing the yeast. One of the things that can by accidentally mess up our cortisol levels and produce more of a stress response is if people go on too intensive of a candida cleanse, right? Say
Mm-hmm.
you have really elevated levels and you're like, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to cut out all like sugars, all fruits, even sweet potatoes. I'm just going to eat green vegetables and proteins, and nuts that, have no mold in them. You could have really intensive die off, and that could spike your cortisol levels up so much because you're increasing the toxic load in the body so heavily. And it could like have you pretty much be bedridden. You're so exhausted if you're not careful. So I'm sure you agree with me, but it's like ease into things like this, when you're going to work on your liver or gut flora or whatever it is, and try to take off that intensive approach, because it could, land you on your butt and you could feel, like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to do something good and now I feel worse. What's going on? And that could stress you out more.
Yeah.
Right. And the restriction can trigger more emotional eating, because now, wow, I'm only allowed to eat these certain foods, and the ego comes in, wants you to rebel and go, oh, I want to eat all these other things. And then the failure kicks in because, wow, I messed up that cleanse. Now I got to try and get back on it. And that can fuel the all or nothing. So use caution and just be very mindful when you're, trying to navigate something like that, because I actually don't believe we need to be really restrictive on a candida protocol. I don't make my clients cut out fruits or anything like that. it's first actually about building a healthy relationship with food for me before even going to that, because it's really hard to balance gut flora if someone's constantly emotionally eating or binging on the things that are, causing all the digestive disruption.
Yeah, cool. Well, great suggestions. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
There's so many connections to all of this. It's just the layers. There's so many layers.
Yeah, no, it's true. But by picking these little threads, we can begin to unravel it and come
Yeah.
back to the ideal state, which is kind of the last topic I want to get into. Is I got this phrase: following my gut more than nutrition trends, intuitive eating,
Hmm.
being a flexitarian, and just having this kind of natural flow with food in our body and
Hmm.
feeling really good about it. I think that's the ultimate state to be
Yeah.
in. That's kind of where I've arrived after so many years of exploring different diets and how does my body work and function and how do I get it optimal, so on and so forth. And it feels really great to be there. So let's get into that. I mean, we've kind of probably illustrated a lot of places where people can relate to where they are and some
Hmm.
really, really good suggestions to kind
Yeah.
of help move through that, which wants us to get to this place of intuitive eating and having this great relationship to food. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, and I love what you say, and I can so agree because I went through the same thing as you. The beauty is as you learn how to manage stress and deal with your emotions and you build this balanced, healthy relationship with food in your body, you do get natural cues of what your body really wants. So if there's a week where your body's just like, give me more salad or give me more oranges, I'm craving it's a craving for vitamin C or something that your body likely actually needs. Maybe, out of the blue, your body's like, I want celery juice or more ginger, whatever it is, you'll get those more natural intuitive cues after you clean up the refined cravings,
Mhm.
as you learn how to manage stress, as your hormones regulate. And it's so incredible because when you do come to that state of balance, you no longer crave anything refined. Like I haven't craved refined sugar in like 10 years, right? I don't ever want it. And it's such a peaceful place because it used to be so intensive. So I think the other beautiful part of building balance with your mind and body is that intuition does get stronger, that gut feeling gets stronger. And so when you're going, do I feel like I need more of this? You're far more likely to get a stronger feeling of a yes or a no more easily, which can help you navigate being more intuitive with your food. Oh, I feel like I do need more protein today or this week. Wow, I was doing heavy protein breakfast, but now I need something that's more, fat or carbohydrate based, so I'm going to switch from, my eggs in the morning to a smoothie, with a plant-based protein or whatever that is. Like, it's so interesting to see the body just go, nope, I'm done with that for now. I want more of this.
Yeah,
Right.
it's incredible.
It is incredible. And the other beautiful thing of that intuition is as we really start to tap into that and know that it's there and we all have it. It's not just certain people. Everybody has the gifts. It's
Yeah.
just that we've been suppressed or certain foods like kind of numb us or pull us down. And so as you connect to it and it gets stronger, it helps you build confidence in yourself. It helps you build more trust in yourself. You lighten up, like your light just shines brighter and you're so excited. And now you have gratitude for your body. Now you feel so grateful for living in the vessel that you do. Now you feel like, hey, now that I'm feeling better, I do feel like I have capacity to start a business or grow my business or be in this career or contribute more to your family life or whatever that is, because you're just in this light yourself and there's this confidence and this self-love and this appreciation for your body, for the food you're eating, and also for the great local producers who are providing the herbs, the nutrition. Like, the light cellar is a gem, and so grateful for the journey you've been on and what you've created there, because it's such an incredible not only space to come and try and buy and have these things available, but the energy and the interaction and the experience, it's much more on an intuitive level, which I think is just so important to have those kinds of spaces to go and interact and have access to these things, because you appreciate it more. Like, as you go on this journey, when you do find more healing and you have more peace with your body, when you purchase that jar of pumpkin spice or that ashwagandha, like, there's just a gratitude, such a deep gratitude, because the benefits and the impact it's having on your body, and it's priceless when you get to that point. And something that I was telling you earlier, which I just want to share on this intuition piece that I really came to discover, over the last 6 or 7 years, but really this year, I always was like, why does it seem like, I know males also are impacted as well, but why does it feel like females are so targeted with weight and body image and to fit into a mold and sold all these diets, and that's the answer, and it really is about weight, like all this external focus. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, because obviously, there's been this picture over the last however many years that you should fit in, your body should look a certain way, you should have a flat stomach, etc. But I'm just like, but where did all that come from? Right. And so some colleagues and friends of mine, we were chatting one day, and it kind of came to me in a meditation and through the awakening that I've experienced over the last 6 months. And it's kind of like, women are so intuitive, and of course men have that gift as well, but it's often said that women just have such a strong intuition, and it's such an important part of our feminine essence. And the diet industry and this whole industry of content to look a certain way, be a certain way, act a certain way, have this perfect body, it's really distracted women and taken them away from, remembering and staying connected to what that true essence is, which is that intuition, this unconditional love, nurturing, compassion for ourselves and for others, and has taken us to pretty much the complete opposite for some people. And so when we can understand that, largely the diet industry, this industry of television and movies and social media and all this photoshopped, edited, unrealistic content, has temporarily blocked us, we can go, well, that's all illusionary. I don't have to focus on that anymore. What if I actually started to shut that off and started to focus more on my own self-care routine, empowering content, empowering people that uplift me, being in community with, other like-minded people that uplift me, and doing my deeper work? Well, guess what? You really get to reconnect with the self-love, the unconditional love, the intuition. It's always been there. It's just that we've gotten disconnected from the distraction out there. But once
Right.
we can wake up more to that, we really come back to ourselves and realize, I've always had this love for myself. I've always had these beautiful gifts, but I got pulled away. Right. And it's incredible because then that intuition wakes back up, and it's such a gift because there's so many ways you can use it and navigate it, to live a life of alignment and do what you love and be more at peace and not feel like you're having to fight with your body and food all the time and have that dictate the way that you live your life.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's amazing. What a great, love how you brought it all around from how it does bring more self-confidence, self-empowerment, and you can kind of come at it from the top or the bottom in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like, emerging out of kind of conventional society, right? Where we are sold these images, we're sold these foods that, keep us in this lower state of vibration. And
Mm-hmm.
once you start to kind of remove that, people they naturally kind of, elevate out of that into this kind of lighter, freer, more empowered space. And, some people for years, kind of early in my journey as an adult, trying to figure my path out, I was very much into kind of yoga and meditation and spirituality. And I was always trying to find the perfect diet that would kind of allow that level of, consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and, facilitate that type of life. And yeah, whichever way you get there, it is like food is a
Yeah.
path of self-realization, liberation. And it's a beautiful thing as part of the journey. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It really is. And when you see a photo or a video or something and you can just go, that's that, and you don't give your power away to it, it's so empowering to be in that space where no matter who you see, what you hear, you can just sit so deeply in your own love and confidence and trust of yourself and your body. I just think that's priceless because that's not something you can go and buy at the store,
No.
right? You can't. So it's priceless to build that within yourself because it really does help to heal the body. You go to that fight or flight and you get back into that rest and digest mode, and it's much easier to maintain that because you're not reacting to everything that you see and hear,
Mhm.
right? So it's a very powerful shift for that too.
Cool. Well, right on. Well, thank you, and for all the work you're doing. I know you're helping transform so many lives as you have transformed your own. That's the path of the healer, right? As we come through those journeys or
Yes.
struggles ourselves, the dark night of the soul, and you come out on the other end, and you just want to turn around. You want to help others, and that's
Mhm.
exactly what you're doing. So, thanks for being on the call with us this morning. If anybody's watching, how can they get a hold of you to kind of follow your work and keep in touch with you and let us know if you do consults or how you work with women and on this path, this journey.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it and very grateful for you and everything that you are doing for the community as well. People can find me at my website at Amber.approved.ca. I have a free emotional eating quiz. So if people are curious if they're struggling, they can definitely check that out. I do offer a 30-minute complimentary body freedom call where I connect with anyone online via Zoom, phone, FaceTime to talk about your health goals and struggles, where you're seeking support, what's holding you back, those kinds of things. So feel free to connect. You can click and book that right on my website as well. And then I have a podcast called the No Sugarcoating Podcast where I talk in depth about all of this and much more. I have over 250 episodes now, so there's a lot of content for you to listen to. So if that's resonant, you can check that out as well.
Cool. Right on. Okay. Well, thanks again being on the call. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you in person at the Light Cellar and
Yes,
doing another call again sometime soon.
sounds great.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right.